Hey y'all, welcome back to Men Do Therapy, a show dedicated to men on their journey to mental wellness. Today we're talking about how culture impacts mental health, and we get into another episode of Masculine Sanity. Let's go. Hey y'all, I'm your host, Rene Garcia. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, whatever you do, stop just for a second. Please subscribe, all right? This is the best way to keep up to date with our weekly shows. We're hitting a lot of different topics, especially this month. If you don't know, July is B.I.P.O.C, mental health awareness, so Black, Indian, person of color. So essentially, I want to say this was a journalist, author. I can't remember their name exactly. It'll pop up in a second. But essentially, about 2008, July was dedicated to minority mental health and mental wellness. So all of this month's episodes are going to be dedicated to that. So please subscribe and keep up to date with all the different stuff that we're going to be putting out, all right? Before we get into our main story, today's dose of masculine sanity has to do with something. And if you don't know what masculine sanity is, it's essentially something that I see out, something that sticks out to me in media or out in the community that just makes me think, what the hell? How are we really helping out men as a result of this? And a really good example is a good friend of mine and his beautiful wife just had twins. I was out shopping for a card for them. For one, it's really hard to find a congratulations card for twins. So what the hell is that about? It's only like 2 or 3 options. That was it. But then I was looking, because he's a good friend of mine, I wanted to get him a separate card that had to do with him being a new father. If you know anything about me, I love being a dad. And I was looking for a father-to-be card. Nothing. 0 father-to-be cards out in a very large supermarket that's probably in every major city. So if you want to make $1 million or want $1 million idea, start making greeting cards for dads, because there was not even a section that said father-to-be. Mother-to-be, baby, 1 or 2 babies, but 0 father-to-be. Disappointed in seeing that. It's insane that we don't support fathers or think of fathers in this greeting card world. All right, so enough about that. I was a little surprised about that, but let's get into our main story today. All right, culture. When we talk about culture, I want you to think of beliefs. I want you to think of customs. I want you to think of things related to race, ethnicity, country of origin, religion, all these different things that we look at that really guide who we are as an identity, right? And identity can be broken down in a lot of different areas, but essentially, culture is that thing that kind of connects us as insert whatever, as Christians, as people from the United States, as Cowboys fans, as, whatever it may be, there's a culture connected to a lot of these identities. And I wanted to speak today because I feel that sometimes we have to be aware of our culture when we're going into or seeking mental health treatment. Now, so I'm going to speak on 2 different sides of this conversation. Let's go ahead and speak from the client's side, all right? So if you are a man or a person that's looking for treatment for any kind of mental health issue, I want you to be aware that, ultimately as therapists, we're just normal people and we're everyday, we have our own struggles, our own experiences. And, I think if culture does play a strong role in who you are and defines who you are as an identity, I think what we want to do is really do our best to find therapists or clinicians who are very aware or very connected to your cultural foundation. Because I think what's going to happen is sometimes, if you feel as though this culture does play a strong role in your life and directs a lot of your decision making, sometimes you want to make sure that you're being able to be heard, you're able to be able to speak freely, you want to be able to speak openly about these feelings, because sometimes, culture connects us in a way because it allows us to feel as though we belong, and it's an identity. And in a way, that's a really great thing. But sometimes it can be a bad thing, because sometimes we can put our culture and our identity and decision making above what's really best for us as an individual. And so sometimes we have to really be able to work with people and be willing to challenge some of these cultures and these cultural guidances that we have in cultural directions, if we really want to figure out kind of what's going on, what's preventing us from growing, what's preventing me from addressing some of these internal issues or these issues that may be slowing me down. And, I want to really emphasize here is that culture really isn't a bad thing. Again, it's not a bad thing to have these cultural identities or use culture as a way to guide your decision making. It's when it's impacting the individual person, the individual's close circle negatively, that we really have to be willing to challenge it. And I think if you're a therapist listening to this, ultimately, again, I mean, there's a culture, right? There's a culture for treating men, and there are biases entering into our therapy room. And sometimes we have to really be willing to challenge some of these biases when we go into working with men and providing a space that is supportive to men wanting to get treatment. It's not uncommon that it's not uncommon that cultural expectations of men is really to not go to therapy, right? And I say that kind of openly and kind of in a kind of like a big paintbrush of a statement, is that a lot of the men that I work with, who's about almost 90% of my clientele is individual men. Very few of them have had previous treatment. In other words, I'm usually the first therapist that they had worked with, and they don't really have a lot of treatment experience prior to myself. And so I really like that in a way, but I also really question, I wonder what was told to them before, right? Before they came and saw me, before they decided to pick up the phone and say, you know what, I need some therapeutic treatment. And, again, I don't want you to leave this conversation or leave this video thinking that, oh man, my culture did me completely wrong and now I have to challenge everything. Again, that's not for me to decide. And in fact, I think if you're having any of those thoughts or feelings, what a great conversation to have with a therapist or a friend, is that really, how has culture maybe helped you out, and maybe how has it not been so helpful? Because it all depends. And I'll never forget that. That's one of the first phrases one of my professors told me when I started my master's program, was that a lot of this depends, right? Sometimes this cultural expectations and cultural decision making is really to save lives, is really there to protect, really there to allow a community to be built inside maybe a community that is not pleasant to their community. And so we just can't sit here and swipe and say everything that this culture has taught them is negative. We have to be willing to place ourselves in their shoes and be understanding towards a person. And if you are the client and you're thinking, man, I hope someone is willing to understand my culture, you have to be willing to open up about this and be transparent about it. Because that, to me, is where the full growth comes from. The person that's willing to challenge, be willing to be transparent, and willing to be open about the ways that their culture has been helpful and maybe not so helpful in this areas. And then you get to decide. You get to decide, where is it appropriate and where is it not appropriate. And most importantly, I think on top of this, it isn't just this individual, it's also their inner circle. Who is around them, their family members, their loved ones, their family system. How is this cultural decision-making and cultural impacts affecting all of the people around them? And these conversations can be very long and very deep, and again, deep-seated, because you just don't develop your culture overnight. I mean, this is something that more than likely has been repeated to you over and over again, possibly generationally. So be willing to have this conversation, be willing to open up. This month we're talking about B.I.P.O.C, Mental Health Month. So we're absolutely going to come back to this idea of how culture can be, how it can impact decision-making. I feel sometimes as minorities, we tend to think some traumas are considered culture, and that's why we think it's okay. These traumas are supposed to happen. But man, they're just not. And it impacts us negatively in the long run. All right. So with that being said, I hope you like this video. I'd love to know any comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. You don't always have to agree with me. And like, share, subscribe. And until then, I'll see you next week. All right. Peace.